It was supposed to be just another lavish lunch for billionaire Grant Ellison. Known for his sharp suits, private jets, and ruthless business deals, Grant wasn't the type to notice the small details, especially not the waitress refilling his water or clearing his plate. He was used to people serving him, and tipping generously was more of a habit than a thoughtful act. So when he slid a folded $100 bill toward the young woman who had been quietly working his table, he didn't even make eye contact. It was just another routine moment in his day, just another thank you exchanged for good service. But what happened next would shake him in a way no boardroom deal ever had. The waitress, Emma, wasn't like anyone Grant had met before, not in a restaurant, not in his world. There was something about the way she looked at the tip, not with excitement or gratitude, but with a calm stillness, like she had been expecting something more. She hesitated for a second, then slipped the money into her apron. Just as Grant stood up to leave, she said quietly, "I think there's something you should know." Grant paused. Maybe it was the tone of her voice. Maybe it was the fact that she didn't sound like someone trying to thank him or flatter him. She sounded serious, measured. He turned slowly. "What's that?" he asked, trying to keep his voice cool. Emma took a breath. "You don't remember me, do you?" The question caught him off guard. He narrowed his eyes, studying her face for any sign of familiarity. She looked young, mid-20s maybe, with tired eyes and a quiet confidence that didn't match the uniform she wore. But no, he didn't recognize her. "Should I?" She gave the smallest smile. "Maybe not. But 10 years ago, you walked away from something you never even realized you left behind." That's when everything shifted. Grant's mind started racing. What could she mean? A lawsuit? A long-lost relative? A scandal from his past? His pulse quickened, not from fear exactly, but from the kind of curiosity that comes when the ground under your feet begins to feel uncertain. Emma reached into her apron, pulling out something small, something personal. She placed it on the table without saying a word. Grant stared at it, the color draining from his face. What was the one secret she knew that could stop a billionaire in his tracks? And why had she waited until now to reveal it? What she told him next would change everything. Grant didn't say a word. His eyes were locked on the object Emma had placed on the table, an old, worn-out keychain. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Faded leather, a small metal tag barely hanging on. But when he picked it up, something shifted in his memory. A sharp flash of an apartment door, late nights in college, and someone laughing beside him. He blinked, trying to place the pieces, but it was all foggy. Emma stood still, watching his reaction. "You gave that to someone once." "Someone who thought you cared," she said quietly, her voice steady but with something heavy behind it. Grant swallowed hard. He suddenly felt out of place, not just in the restaurant but in his own skin. It was like a part of his past had come to life right in front of him, and he wasn't ready for it. "Where did you get this?" he finally asked. Emma didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced around the restaurant, making sure no one was listening. The lunch crowd had thinned, and the buzz of conversation had died down. She leaned in slightly. "You were 19. You lived in a tiny one-bedroom with a guy named Mark. He was your roommate, and your best friend, or at least he thought so." Grant's breath caught. Mark. The name hit him like a wave. He hadn't heard it in years. They were inseparable back then, both chasing dreams, both broke and full of ambition. But somewhere along the way, things had gone wrong. There had been a fight, a bad one, and Grant had walked away, never looking back. He had told himself it was just part of moving forward, part of growing up. He looked at Emma again, now seeing her in a different light. "Are you Mark's sister?" Emma gave a small nod. "Half-sister. I was only 12 when you knew him. But I remember you. He used to talk about you all the time. Said you were going to build something big one day, that you'd take care of the people who helped you get there." Grant looked down, unable to hold her gaze. The keychain in his hand suddenly felt a lot heavier. Emma crossed her arms. "He waited, you know. Even after things fell apart. He kept believing you'd come back, but you never did. Grant's voice was barely a whisper. What happened to him? Emma hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the exit, then back to him. That's the part you're not ready for, she said, but you need to hear it. And just like that, the ground beneath Grant felt even less stable than before, because whatever she was about to tell him, it wasn't just about the past. It was going to change everything about his future. Grant sat back down without thinking, the keychain still in his hand. The confidence he usually wore like a second skin had cracked. In the corner booth of that quiet diner, the billionaire who once ruled boardrooms suddenly looked like a man facing a ghost. He studied Emma's face again, searching for some trace of the boy he used to know. Mark had always talked about having a younger sister, but Grant had barely paid attention. Back then, his mind was always on the next step, the next opportunity. He had promised loyalty but left as soon as things got complicated. Emma sat across from him now, her hands resting calmly on the table. After you left, everything got worse, she began. Mark tried to hold on. He worked 2 jobs, tried to pay off the rent that you both owed. But it wasn't just about the money. You were more than a friend to him. You were like family. When you disappeared, something in him broke. Grant didn't respond. He couldn't. There was a tightness in his chest that wouldn't go away. The idea that his success might have come at the cost of someone else's destruction, someone he had once called a brother, was something he had never allowed himself to consider. Emma leaned in. You want to know what happened to him, but this isn't just about what he went through. It's about what you chose not to see. The words cut deep. Grant had always believed he'd earned everything through hard work and risk, but now, sitting across from this stranger who clearly knew more than she was saying, he started to wonder how much of that story was one-sided. Had his rise come by stepping on people he once cared about? Had he rewritten his own past to make it easier to live with? Emma pulled out a folded piece of paper and placed it on the table. He wrote this a few years ago. He never sent it, but I think you need to read it. Grant hesitated, then slowly opened the letter. The handwriting was familiar, shaky but unmistakably Mark's. The words weren't angry. They were sad, full of questions, full of pain. It wasn't an accusation. It was a farewell. Before he could finish reading, Emma spoke again. You think all this is about guilt, but it's not. This is about truth. And it's about what you're going to do now, because you're not the only one who's been keeping secrets. Grant looked up, heart pounding. There was more. And somehow, he sensed the real story, the one that could break everything wide open, hadn't even begun yet. The letter trembled slightly in Grant's hands as he read the last line. If he ever remembers me, tell him I never stopped hoping he'd come back. That was it. No anger, no blame. Just a quiet kind of sorrow that left a knot in Grant's stomach. He folded the letter carefully, but it felt like the air in the room had thickened around him. Emma was still watching, calm but guarded, like she was waiting for something. I had no idea, he said finally, his voice low, almost hoarse. I didn't think it mattered back then. I thought we were just kids trying to survive. Emma nodded slowly. And then you survived. He didn't. The silence after that was brutal. Grant wanted to ask where Mark was now, but something in Emma's tone made him afraid to hear the answer. Instead, he reached for the glass of water in front of him and took a slow sip, trying to ground himself. This wasn't like any challenge he faced before. There were no numbers to fix, no deals to make. Just the past, staring him in the face. Then Emma said something that chilled him to the core. Mark wasn't the only one you left behind. Grant froze, his eyes snapped up to meet hers. What do you mean? She hesitated, then reached into her bag. This time, what she placed on the table wasn't a letter, it was a photograph. Grant's heart skipped. The image was a little worn around the edges, but it was clear. A boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, smiling up at the camera. And standing next to him, Mark, older, thinner, eyes tired but warm. And in the background, Tucked barely into the frame was a familiar jacket, Grant's jacket, the one he used to wear in college. He stared at the photo for a long moment. Is that? Emma nodded. That's Liam, Mark's son. Grant's breath caught. The timeline hit him all at once. 10 years. The age fit. The silence from Mark. The secret Emma had been holding onto. Emma leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. And here's what you really need to know. Mark always said he wasn't sure, but he hoped. He hoped Liam might be yours. The world tilted. Grant felt the table, the photo, even his own thoughts blur for a moment. Emma continued, slowly, carefully. He didn't want to drag you into it. He wanted to give Liam a life without that weight. But when Mark got sick... She stopped. Grant could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears. He wasn't sure what terrified him more, what she was saying, or what might come next. Because if any of this was true, everything he thought he knew about his past, and maybe even his future, was about to be rewritten. Grant felt like the air had been knocked out of him. The idea that Liam could be his son was too big to fully process, and yet it was already changing something inside him. The guilt that had been simmering beneath the surface now burned hotter, sharper. He looked at the photograph again, trying to see traces of himself in the boy's face. But before he could ask the next question, Emma glanced at the entrance of the restaurant. Her expression changed, more guarded now, almost anxious. I shouldn't be here this long, she said, her voice lower. There's more to this, but I didn't come here alone. Grant sat up straighter. What do you mean? Emma looked him dead in the eye. You're not the only one who's been looking for answers. There's someone else. Someone who's been digging into your past for months. His pulse jumped. Who? Emma hesitated, then pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a news article, one Grant hadn't seen yet. The headline was bold. Asterisk mysterious legal claim targets billionaire tech investor over forgotten partnership. Asterisk beneath, it was a blurred image of a man standing on courthouse steps. Grant grabbed the phone and tapped the photo. It loaded a clearer version, older now, thinner than he remembered, but unmistakable. It was Mark. Alive. Grant's jaw clenched. You said he was gone. I said he got sick. I never said he died, Emma replied quietly. He let everyone believe it, even me for a while. It was his way of disappearing. Grant stared at her in disbelief. Why would he fake his own death? She leaned closer. Because someone tried to ruin him. He believes it came from inside your company. A deal that was supposed to save his startup turned into the reason he lost everything. He thought you had something to do with it. Grant shook his head, stunned. I had no idea. I haven't even seen him in. I know. But he didn't know who to trust, Emma said. And now he's coming back. Not just for you, but for what he says he's owed. The weight of it hit hard. This wasn't just about an old friendship or even a forgotten child. Now there were legal threats, business secrets, and the very real possibility that someone inside Grant's empire had betrayed one of the few people who ever believed in him. Grant sat back, mind spinning. If Mark was alive, and if he believed Grant had helped destroy him, then whatever came next wasn't just personal. It was war. The drive to the private address Emma gave him felt like the longest of Grant's life. Every streetlight, every turn, pushed him closer to something he wasn't sure he was ready to face. The truth, not just about Mark, or the boy who might be his son, but about himself and the empire he'd built without ever really looking back. The house was small, quiet, tucked behind a line of trees just outside the city. Grant parked his car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Then he stepped out and walked to the door. Before he could knock, it opened. There he was, Mark. Older, yes. Thinner, with grey in his beard and a tiredness in his eyes. But still Mark. Still the friend Grant once knew better than anyone. Neither spoke for a second. Then Mark stepped aside. Come in. Inside, the house was modest, filled with books, kids' drawings, and the smell of fresh coffee. It felt lived in, real. And there, in the corner of the living room, sat a boy on the floor, headphones on, building something out of Legos. Grant glanced at him, Liam, and felt his heart twist. Mark noticed. He doesn't know, not yet. Grant nodded. I understand. They sat down across from each other. Grant didn't waste time. I didn't know what happened to you. Emma told me about the deal. It's someone in my company. It wasn't you, Mark interrupted. At least I don't think it was. But someone close to you, someone you trusted, used your name. They offered funding, tied it to fake conditions, then pulled everything just as we were scaling. Wiped me out. Grant's jaw tightened. Give me names. I'll find out who did it. I already did, Mark said, and slid a folder across the table. Grant opened it and felt his blood run cold. It was a former business partner, someone Grant had mentored. Trusted, promoted, the betrayal ran deep. I was angry, Mark said. I wanted revenge. I even thought about going public, but then I got sick. And I had to decide what mattered more, hurting you or protecting him. He glanced toward Liam. Grant's voice cracked. Is he mine? Mark hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I got the test done last year. I just didn't know if you were ready. Grant leaned back, the truth crashing down like a wave. It hurt, but it was also freeing. I want to be part of his life, he said. I know, Mark replied. But there's one more thing. Grant looked up. Mark pulled out another envelope. This isn't just about you and me, he said. It's about what Liam's already done. That kid built something last month, a prototype, and someone's already trying to steal it. Grant blinked. Wait, what? Mark nodded. You're not just meeting your son, you're about to meet your smartest competitor. And just like that, everything changed again. Grant sat there stunned, still holding the envelope Mark had slid across the table. The idea that Liam, his son, had already caught the attention of people in the tech world felt surreal. It was like looking in a mirror that reflected both his past and the future all at once. When he finally found his voice, it came out soft but sure. Then we protect him. Together. Mark nodded slowly, his expression more at ease now. That's why I brought you here. Not for apologies or explanations. I needed to know if you were still the man I once trusted, or if you'd forgotten what really matters. Grant looked toward the living room, where Liam had now put down the Legos and was sketching something with intense focus. There was so much of himself in the boy, the curiosity, the drive, the need to create. But there was something else too, kindness, warmth, traits that must have come from Mark. In the days that followed, Grant took action. He launched an internal audit of his company, quietly rooting out the betrayal that had nearly destroyed Mark's startup. The former partner, greedy and calculating, was removed without fanfare, and the truth was buried quietly to avoid dragging Mark back into the spotlight he never wanted. Meanwhile, Grant began spending time with Liam. At first, it was just weekends, chess games, robotics kits, walks in the park. But over time, the bond deepened. They laughed. They'd argued over which AI models were the smartest. And for the first time in years, Grant felt like he was building something that wasn't for profit, but for purpose. Emma kept her job at the diner, but Grant helped her enroll in a coding boot camp. She had the kind of grit he admired, and she wanted to make her own way. Mark, now in remission, started consulting again, quietly under a different name, offering wisdom to startups that reminded him of the one he lost. As for Liam, his prototype, a machine learning tool that could predict structural weaknesses in bridges, caught the attention of a major engineering firm. But instead of handing it over, he asked Grant to help him patent it. Together, they did. Looking back, Grant realized the biggest deal he ever made wasn't on paper. It was the one he almost missed, reclaiming the people he once walked away from. Billionaire or not, that was the real legacy. And as Liam stood in front of a small crowd one afternoon, presenting his invention at a local science fair, he looked over at his father and smiled. Not because he built something impressive, but because he finally knew where he came from and who would stand beside him, no matter what came next.